All right, hello and welcome everybody. I am Ryan Johnson. I am the division chief for the Department of Environmental Health and Quality's Food and Housing Division. And today I'm going to be discussing our MEHKO program and the options that we will be presenting to our Board of Supervisors later this year in November. And our main focus is to gather feedback from all members of the public on these proposed options so we can put those into our presentation to the board. So today I'm going to be going over our MEHKO overview, really what our program looks like now. And then the second half is going to be the main part of our focus, and that's going to be on those permanent program options. And there's two different categories that we'll be discussing during that section. So let's start with our overview of our current temporary MEHKO program. And really, the timeline here shows how far we've come since home-based kitchen operations were first introduced with the cottage food program back in 2013. Now, for the MEHKO program, it took about 6 years for legislation to come into effect for that, and that started in 2019 and actually went into effect of January of 2020. Now, here in San Diego County, the Board of Supervisors authorized a temporary program in January of 2022. That program was set for 2 years and will be expiring in February of 2024. So, since that program started, we've been doing ongoing community outreach for this program, helping people understand the laws, the regulations surrounding this, and helping them work through our internal permitting process here in San Diego County. Now, once we knew that the program was going to be ending and we had to return to the board, we started our public engagement meetings. And so this is the second of those that we're doing here in August. And like I said, in November, we're going to be presenting to the board. Now, I don't have the exact date yet on when that board meeting is going to be, but we will have our website up to date with this information as it gets finalized. So I encourage everybody to continue to check back on our website for the most up-to-date information on the status of our with our MEHKO program. Now let's look a little bit into the requirements in state law. And I want to preface this with, for those of you that may already know a little bit about the MEHKO program, there's been some recent changes that were due to a bill passing. And that bill was AB 1325. It went into effect in July. This was an urgency legislation bill, which means it went into effect as soon as the governor signed it. And what it did is it modified the pre-existing limitations established for the maximum meals that could be sold per week and the maximum annual gross sales limit. It moved it from 60 meals a week up to 90, also went from $50,000 to $100,000 for the gross sales limit, and added in a definition for what is considered a meal as part of this program, which previously there was no definition of that. So with this new addition, the definition of a meal now is anything that is in the amount or quantity of food that is intended to be consumed by one customer in one city. And a meal may include one or more of any of the following items that you might see on a menu, which includes a main dish, appetizers, side dishes, beverages, baked goods, and desserts. Now, the rest of what was established in the MEHKO law is still in place. So that means this is a restaurant that can be based out of a home, an apartment, or a condo. There is still a daily meal cap of no more than 30 meals per day. And any MEHKO operator can offer dine-in, pickup, or delivery services. Now, from the Department of Environmental Health and Quality, or DEHQ's perspective, there is a health permit that is required for all MEHKO operators, and that is issued prior to the MEHKO being able to start their operation. And then we conduct annual routine inspections after that in each subsequent year. If our department does receive any complaints of foodborne illnesses or operational complaint issues, we will go out and investigate those as well, in addition to the routine inspections. Now, part of the state law that was written for MEHKOs put some limitations in there. And that really is for some of the local jurisdictions on what they could and could not do. We all know these MEHKOs are going into residential areas, so local jurisdictions could not impose additional restrictions for zoning purposes because these are residential. These are not zoned as commercial locations. Each local jurisdiction is also responsible to enforce their own existing local ordinances, regulations, and code compliance. And a city cannot opt in or opt out of a program. So if the Board of Supervisors continues with this program, just like our 2-year temporary program, it will go county-wide in every city within San Diego County. Now, because there are two different halves of regulation oversight, this slide really breaks down the roles of DEHQ and the roles of the local jurisdictions or the county, our county planning and development services or Department of Public Works. Now, from the DEHQ perspective, our role is really to focus on our retail food code enforcement. We're focusing on food safety. That includes making sure that there's no vermin in the home, making sure food is properly stored, handled, disposed of. There's no buildup of excess food refuse. We're also responsible for making sure that MEHKO operators do not exceed the daily or weekly meal service, the gross annual income limits, and then, of course, again, like I mentioned, investigating any potential foodborne illness complaints that we receive. Now, from the city or county's jurisdiction perspective, they're looking at the land use ordinance enforcement. They are focusing on enforcing any signage or outdoor advertising displays. Those are not allowed as part of the MEHKO program. Any noise complaints they might receive, any non-food debris or refuse buildup that's a byproduct of the operation, traffic or parking concerns, public nuisance regulations, and then any home construction or remodeling that's being done to help support the MEHKO would go through the local jurisdictions. Now, when we started our previous community outreach efforts prior to our temporary program, there were a lot of concerns that we heard related to potential impacts to the community as a result of these MEHKOs. And these concerns really included a wide spectrum of issues that range from traffic and parking, noise from outside food service or outside dining, smoke and odors that might be from either the indoor or the outdoor cooking that's taking place, any impact of the disposal of fats, oils, and grease into the municipal or private wastewater systems, and fire safety because of the added equipment and operations that might be taking place here. Now, when the board elected to adopt our 2-year temporary program, they also opted into additional local ordinance requirements. So these were not part of state law, and these were built in as part of our 2-year temporary program. The reason I'm highlighting them here now, these are going to come back a little bit later as we discuss the options for the board to decide moving forward. So the options that were built in to our local program here, the food safety certificate is required prior to a permit being issued. Food storage areas, they can be outside in a covered area, a garage, a shed, as long as it is within a enclosed refrigerator or freezer. That helps add an extra layer of food safety protection to the food that's being stored in those areas. It does limit the number of MEHKOs per residence to 1. And then for any MEHKO that's operating on a private well, there is an initial and ongoing testing requirement to ensure that that water is potable. And that means that it's drinkable and safe to be used within the MEHKO operation to prepare your food and wash your dishes. Now, taking a look at our current program status, as of the beginning of this month of August, we had 62 permitted MEHKOs. Our department has not received any complaints of foodborne illness. And in the few inspections that we've been able to do for those that started in year 1, we have not observed any major risk factor violations during those. We have received some complaints throughout the length of the program. And I mean, this is over the past, year and a half. We had 2 MEHKO operators that were operating outside of state law allowances. We had 1 MEHKO operator that was selling alcohol without an approved ABC license. And this one's important because while our department doesn't regulate this, ABC does, and it is a requirement to have a license with them prior to serving alcohol as part of your food sales. We also have not received any reports of community impact complaints. And that was for those items that I discussed earlier with the fire concerns, the noise, the parking, et cetera. And we have received 66 unpermitted home-based food business complaints. So that means our department has received a complaint of somebody operating a business without a permit that we've gone out and investigated and provided guidance on for their options to continue to operate within the state law allowances. And I will say of those 66, we've had 4 that have become MEHKO operators. So I see that as a good success of getting people the information they needed to start the business that they wanted to and make sure that they're following all of the permitting requirements. Now, I mentioned the bill AB 1325. There was another bill that went into effect this January that had some provisions written into it that do impact and address MEHKOs. So that law was AB 972. And really the basis for this law was to remove barriers for sidewalk vendors by providing a little bit more flexibility for their cart operation and storage locations. Now, part of these changes overlap with the MEHKO. However, those portions need to be approved by the local governing body, which is our board of supervisors. So this bill allows a private home to be used as a storage for these compact mobile food facilities. These are non-motorized mobile food facilities. And if approved by the local governing body, a MEHKO can serve as a commissary for up to 2 compact mobile operations that are being operated by the MEHKO to sell their food from those carts as an extension of their business. The other part that the local governing body can vote to approve is for a MEHKO to sell non-potentially hazardous food or whole uncut produce. Non-potentially hazardous food are things that are shelf stable, don't need refrigeration to prevent bacterial growth. And the sales of those items do not count towards the MEHKO weekly meal and gross annual sales limitations. Those are items a little bit different from what they're selling as part of the MEHKO. The MEHKO is really those meal components that they're building. These would be offset where it's the non-potentially hazardous items or produce if they want to do that as an extension as well. But like I said, both of these options do require action by the board, and we'll discuss a little bit later those options that we're going to be presenting to get feedback on. All right. I'm going to pause for a second before I move into the MEHKO program actions. I do have one question in our chat right now. What is the process for handling complaints? Are there warnings followed by fines for non-compliance? What are the potential fines? Is there a way for local stakeholder organizations to get involved to provide support and education to encourage compliance? So the way our department works for complaint investigations, if we receive a complaint from the public, we will go out and investigate that complaint. If we find it to be justified, there is a fee in our local ordinance that does have a justified complaint fee that will be billed to that operator. So that way they are responsible for being non-compliant. Our other permit holders do not absorb that cost. We would typically issue a notice saying, please discontinue this, make these modifications. If it's for an unpermitted vendor, we're going to give them all the information to become permitted and help walk them through that process. If they do continue that, we do have a set enforcement process, which I won't go into because our goal is really to get people to get into compliance with that first meeting. And that's really what we work for. We don't fine. Our department does not issue fines. We have cost recovery fees built into our program. So basically the work that we do, we recover the costs for that. So there are no additional fines that we will levy. Is there a way for local stakeholder organizations to get involved to provide support? Absolutely. We partner regularly with them. We're happy to do outreach for the community or any of these groups to help potential operators understand the requirements of our program and make sure that they know the steps they need to take to not have to be issued a notice of violation. All right, let me shift over to our MEHKO board actions, and I'll come back to questions here towards the end. So I'm going to go through the first 4 main decision points, the actions the board would need to take this November. So action 1 would be to authorize a local program as prescribed in current state law with no additional ordinance language. So this would actually back out those ordinance components I mentioned and put the program just to what is indicated in state law. The second option, which is what is currently reflective of our 2-year program that we're in, would be to authorize the program as prescribed in state law, including those previously approved ordinance language items that were established as part of this temporary program. And those were for the food safety certificate, the allowable food storage area, the number of MEHKOs per residence, and the well water testing requirements. The third action the board can take will be to authorize a local program as prescribed in state law, plus the recent SB 972 legislation options, which I'm going to dig in more detail here shortly. But really that's to sell food from a compact mobile facility, act as a commissary, and have a higher sales and meal volume cap. So this would just be with the 972 options, but not with the ordinance components. So you can see it's a choose your own adventure sort of option here with every potential choice that the board gets to make a decision on. And the last action that the board can take would be to authorize a local program that's prescribed in state law, but that includes our ordinance language and the additional new SB 972 components. So action 4 is really the more inclusive option that covers the ordinance components as well as 972 options, in addition to what's existing in state law. So the new ordinance option components, now this is going to be related to that SB 972 change. So these options would be a subset of decisions that the board will make in addition to one of those 4 actions they opted for. So if they opt for an action that includes the 972, the following will be the options that they will also make a decision on. So option A, authorize a MEHKO to sell non-potentially hazardous food or produce for up to 2 compact mobile food operations that are operated by the home-based business, with all sales from those compact mobile operations to not count towards the annual meal gross sales limits established in the retail food code. So what this means is if the board decides to authorize, a MEHKO can have up to 2 mobiles that they operate themselves, sell their product out of those mobiles within the allowances of that program. And those sales do not count towards that 30 or 90 meal caps or the $100,000 per year. Option B would be to authorize a permitted microenterprise home kitchen operation to serve as a commissary for up to 2 compact mobile operations that they are operating. So this would then allow the MEHKO to store the cart at their home, prepare the food at their home that's then going to be used on the cart. Now, the reason this is a critical option is because in our mobile food program, all food preparation and storage has to be done out of a permitted, approved commissary or food facility. The home allowance for these carts currently is just storage only. So this option would allow, if you were also a MEHKO, that you can have your MEHKO act as your commissary instead of needing to pay or rent space at another commissary location for the food portion of that. Option C is going to be to authorize a MEHKO to sell a higher number of meals prepared if the MEHKO also operates a compact mobile. So our current allowance is 30 meals a day and 90 meals a week. So if a MEHKO also had their mobile permitted with our department, again, being able to sell a higher number of meals in conjunction with that mobile operation. And option D would then be to have them allow a MEHKO to have a higher gross annual sales cap if the MEHKO is also operating a mobile food facility. So the current allowance, like I mentioned, was just raised to $100,000. If the board took this option, they would determine a higher limit to allow as long as the MEHKO was using a mobile. Now, if a MEHKO did not utilize the mobile, even if the board voted for this option, those MEHKOs without the mobile facility as a extension of their business would just be limited to that $100,000 in gross sales allowance. Now, this is the important part. This is what we really want to get as many people engaged and involved with as possible to have your voice be part of the data that we're going to be presenting to our board of supervisors. And that's the feedback portion. So in order to help facilitate that, we have created a feedback form. And I will leave this slide up here for a little while longer because I'm also going to put a link in the chat for everybody that's on this. But if you go ahead and take your phone out, aim a camera at the screen through the Photos app, it will link you over to a feedback form that you will be able to provide your feedback on all those options that I just presented on. And it will also allow you to provide any options or feedback on the current ordinance language as well. So I really encourage any and all people that are interested, please go use the feedback form. We do ask that all of the responses are submitted by the end of this month, August 31st, to give us time to tabulate all the data and build it into our presentation for the board. And with that, that is the end of our presentation, and I will go ahead and address some of the questions that we have received. And I'd like to start first with some of the questions that were asked in our initial session, just to help kick off some of the thoughts that we've already heard. Has the compact mobile food operation allowance been approved yet? No. Like I mentioned, the board does have to take specific action to put those allowances in for the MEHKO program. Does a mobile food facility consist of a vendor at a farmer's market? So can a mobile operate at a farmer's market? The way we permit our mobile program is our department will permit them as a mobile within the county of San Diego and ensure that they meet state law requirements for the mobile operation. Our department does not distinguish where that mobile can operate. That determination is made by each local jurisdiction. Each city may have allowances or restrictions on how and where a mobile can operate. When it comes to a farmer's market, that's up to the farmer's market organizer to allow the mobile as one of their approved vendors. But no additional permits would be needed from our department for a mobile who was listed as an approved vendor of a farmer's market. If looking to expand a concept and serve food off of a mobile and set it out up in front of the house to sell from the mobile cart, again, that is going to be up to the local jurisdiction to regulate where you can park a cart, where you can operate it from, and for how long. So please be sure if you are looking to start the mobile operation side of your business, you also want to check with your local jurisdiction on what the restrictions are going to be for the cart's storage and operation. What kind of mobile carts could work as a MEHKO? Would this be like hot dog carts? Well, yes. Our code for our mobile program really restricts it to the type of preparation that's being done off those carts. So limited food preparation is really a scaled down version of what you would do in your kitchen. And so there are a lot of options available based on the type of food you're selling at your MEHKO. But we have a program specifically dedicated to that. So I would encourage anybody that is interested in pursuing a mobile food facility permit to reach out to our department directly to ask questions, and they'll be able to help walk you guys through that. For signage, we had some questions about posting signs, small signs, large signs, whatever it is outside of the home, in the windows, to advertise the MEHKO operation. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the signage requirement is a part of local jurisdictions' allowances. The current law says there can be no signage at the private home advertising a MEHKO, but that enforcement does go to our local potentially code enforcement or other jurisdictional department that they have tasked with enforcing their local ordinances. Okay, so the last two questions from previous. Will we be presenting to the cities prior to the Board of Supervisors vote? Or will we be going to any city council meetings? Yes, we will. We're already doing outreach with the city jurisdictions to let them know of the same options that we're presenting here today. And if any of them do ask for us to attend a city council meeting, we are happy to do so, just like we did prior to the start of our temporary program. All right, I'm going to shift over to some of the questions that are in our chat. One of the questions was, do we issue a cease and desist order? Yes, we do. If we find any operation that's operating without a valid permit, we do issue a cease and desist. No business that is selling food is able to sell food without the applicable health permits. Another question, for the business only focused on preparing dessert, how does the allowance of a MEHKO apply? Well, with the new definition of a meal, it's anything that one person can eat in one sitting. So if you were selling cupcakes as your dessert business and you were selling them cupcake at a time to each person, each cupcake is a meal, and you are limited to 30 meals per day or 90 meals per week. So that determination is going to be based on really the business model that each MEHKO has decided on how they want to sell their food product. And I see Heather added on to the cease and desist order. It also could be issued if there's a major health violation that cannot be corrected immediately. Absolutely. For any food operation, if there's an imminent health hazard, we have the ability in state law to actually issue a closure notice to suspend their operation until they're able to correct that. All right. Another question in the chat. Does this mean that a current MEHKO can commissary and sell the same food from the mobile cart, or are there food type limitations? Should you choose the option that covers this? Does the MEHKO have to own and be the permit holder for the mobile cart, or can they sponsor one? That's a great question. No, the purpose of this and the decision determination is the MEHKO is running the mobile as an extension of their own business. If they have one of their full-time employees, that's part of the MEHKO allowance, operating the cart, that's fine. But they cannot sublease out the cart or sponsor a cart for somebody else. It's really made for the MEHKO operator to expand their business a little more, but it's still their business expansion. And yes, the MEHKO would be selling the same food off of their cart they're producing in the MEHKO, unless the board approves the additional allowance for those non-potentially hazardous foods or whole produce to not count towards their MEHKO allowance. Those would also be able to be sold from these compact mobile carts. Another question, is there a distance limit that we can sell from the home? No, so our mobile program is countywide. And what you would want to make sure you do is check with your local jurisdictions on where you can set up. There are restrictions on sidewalk vending in each city. So if you're looking to set up on the sidewalk in front of your home, I will say there's probably going to be additional requirements or restrictions on that operation. But if you want to go into another area, another city, from where you live to where you want to go to where people are buying food, and that's the whole point of a mobile program. That again is as long as you check with the city that you're selling in to get all of the applicable permits and requirements for that. Question for if we can get a copy of this presentation emailed. The presentation that I'm recording now is going to be posted on our website for everybody to go back and review for any information that they might have missed. How will you regulate the number of meals per day and per month? We will do that typically during our investigations, complaint responses, assessment of the amount of capacity done at a home, and if need be, ask the MEHKO to provide us the records of all the meals that they're selling. Our hope is that the MEHKO operators understand these restrictions just like they do with all the other food safety requirements and will abide by them as part of their operation. What are the limitations on people that can consume on site? That limitation is 30 meals per day. So you can have up to 30 meals being sold, whether it's on site, delivered, or picked up. That is the limitation. I would say the other limitation would be the capacity of your property on what you can handle, and be aware of any noise ordinance restrictions that might limit when and how long you can do that for. What if someone eats 5 cupcakes as his or her meal? Seems odd to limit it to 1 cupcake. The 1 cupcake's my example, really. So it's what one person can eat in one sitting. That's a meal. And so depending on how you model your plan, if you do smoothies for breakfast, a smoothie is a meal. That's for one person. If somebody opts to eat 5 full-size cupcakes as a meal, that's not typical. And we might have additional questions because restrictions on MEHKOs is you can't cater. And so we would look more as to if those 5 cupcakes are indeed for one person, but that's not a typical one that we would be looking at as much. Really, it's to one person, one sitting, any of the options that you could normally find on a menu choice. Will MEHKOs continue after next February 2024? That is really the decision that we are working towards here with the Board of Supervisors. So the temporary program ends in February, and the board in November will make the decision as to whether it will continue through and start off as a permanent program next February. I will take a question. I see one hand up right now. Karen, you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, thank you. I have 2 questions. So the first is, did the board ask to consider AB 972, or is this just an option? Is Department of Environmental Health and Quality just using this opportunity to bring it forward?
Because, and I may ask my counterpart to jump in here, but because there was new language specifically towards the MEHKO program, when we go to the board, we present a comprehensive presentation on all things for their consideration. And because SB 972 included additional options to be voted on by the Board of Supervisors, we want to make sure they have the opportunity now to consider those as part of the future of the program.
Nothing more to add, Ryan. You really hit the nail on the head there. We want to make sure that our board knows all of the options that exist out there and give them the ability to make those policy decisions, Karen. So we are bringing it forth as part of our update and part of the one of the options, as well as when we're bringing back, the renewal of our temporary program.
And so too, just for everyone and for my clarity too, so you're going to be giving a report to the board when you go back, and some of the facts that you've told us in this presentation, you're going to be bringing back before the board. The fact that there haven't been any major risk violations or any health violations by permitted MEHKOs, and just positive, well, from my point, positive things like that. But you're going to be bringing back a report to them in addition to asking them to vote on these options, correct?
That is correct. We'll be including all of the data in the board letter and providing the option for the board to hear a presentation when the item is heard. So yes, all of the data that we've collected so far will be provided to the board.
Okay. And my last question is, so the people listening here and the many supporters of MEHKOs and home chefs, how can they help make sure that the temporary MEHKO program gets passed and voted on by the Board of Supervisors to make it a permanent MEHKO program?
Thanks, Karen, for that question. Really appreciate it. So in addition to providing your feedback, which we are going to utilize as part of our data that's been collected and present that to the board, the community also has the option to participate in our board meetings. Those are public. So there's a couple ways that you could do that. And I can post a link to the clerk of the board in the chat here. But on the clerk of the board website, there's options for providing comments to the board, either by email, electronically, or by going to the board meeting and speaking at the board meeting to provide your comments directly to the board when they hear this item. So all of that participation is welcome to really, provide your feedback directly. And so we'll put that in the chat.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Appreciate that. Karen, thank you for the questions. Another question that came up, is there a checklist for an inspection so we can prepare for success on an authorization to operate? And Joel has posted in there for everybody the link to our home kitchen operation webpage. If you go down to our documents and resources, there is a lot of information to help you prepare and understand what is required for a MEHKO program. Q&As, the SOP form, the standard operating procedures you have to fill out, and a lot of the other information that will help you with that. So please, I encourage everybody, go to our website. We have a wealth of knowledge that we've been putting together over the past 2 years to help everybody navigate these requirements. I've got a question for, can you give an example of a cost recovery charge and how much it would cost a MEHKO if they were cited for signage? This one's a little challenging of a question because the different agencies that would address that, and it's a jurisdictional response, I don't know all of their fees and costs for recovery. From our standpoint, and I don't have this number off the top of my head, we charge an hourly rate for any justified complaints that we are able to validate. And that fee is listed on our fee schedule, which can also be found on our website as well. Would a simple homemade sign example for example barbecue also not be permitted? Yep. Any signage cannot have signage posted or advertising your business at your property. It was one of the restrictions in state law for this program. So advertising will need to be word of mouth, websites, social media, all of the other avenues that you have aside from a sign posted at your property. All right, is cottage food operation the same as MEHKO, including the requirements of a Class A and Class B license? That's a good question. No, the cottage food is a different program and with different allowances. Those cottage food allowances are strictly for prepackaged, non-potentially hazardous food being produced out of that cottage food operation. So that's things like breads, dried pastas, nut mixes, jams, jellies, some cakes without potentially hazardous food ingredients in the frostings. So you can't have some of those really good homemade buttercream frostings in the cottage food program. The MEHKO program is essentially a
Did you mean to call me?
The MEHKO program is essentially a restaurant. So you have a wider scope of what you're able to sell out of the MEHKO. Now, also there is a limitation. You can only have one of the two operating out of your private home. So the decision is going to need to be made as a business choice. Do you want to go down the path of the cottage food operation and sell the products allowed in that program, or be a MEHKO and sell the food options items that are allowed as part of that program? But you cannot do both. So it'll be one or the other. Now, can you do baked goods as part of your MEHKO? Absolutely. But those are not going to be packaged for a packaged retail sale. Those are going to be sold as to-go items, just like a restaurant would if you ordered from a bakery. All right. I think I've got all the questions in the chat and the ones from our last session. Wanted to open up if anybody else has any additional questions, or if I might have missed or overlooked your question in the chat, please let me know. I am going to switch the slide now here. If for any reason you have any additional questions on the options or the information I've shared with you today, you can please email me. My email is on the screen there, ryan.johnson@sdcounty.ca.gov. And like I said, this presentation will be posted on our website by the end of next week for anybody that was not able to make the meeting today. Is a food handler card enough, or is a food safety manager certificate needed? Carlos, like I mentioned, the food safety manager certificate is one of the local ordinance options that was put into place, and it is required prior to the start of your business. It's a requirement for all food facilities, but the difference here with the MEHKO program is that you have to obtain that before we can issue the permit. All of our other food facilities have an allowance in state law that gives them additional time, but the local ordinance here push that as a requirement. So if you are looking to start your business, I would say you will need to start working on getting that food safety manager certificate done. Now, all the rest of the food handlers that are working for you, that could be family members, that could be roommates, that could be your hired up to one equivalent full-time employee. They will all need the food handler card if they are handling or preparing food in any way.
Okay, thank you. Sounds good.
No problem. Any other questions or comments for me? Okay. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for your time today, and please reach out to us in the future as we continue to work through this process to present our information to the board in November. Have a great day. Talk to you all later.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Ryan.